The 12, Jesus' inner circle, the apostles. Who were these guys and what happened to them? Hey everybody, it's Wednesday. I'm in the ugly orange chair. It is time for Bible study. I really hope that you'll join us this evening at 7:30. You can join us live in the fellowship hall. We'll spread out, or you can join us via Zoom. All the information for the video link is in the description of this video, and it's out on the church's Facebook page and everywhere else. So you can find it, I promise. And if you can't, just contact me. Today we are studying the second half of the 9th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew and into the 10th chapter. So I encourage you, just go ahead and read through the end of chapter 10. It doesn't take that long. It's 5 minutes. No problem, right? And what you find, and what I want to mention right now, and I gave you a hint earlier there, is the one place in the Gospel of Matthew, the very beginning of chapter 10 here, where there is the story, not just the story of the calling of one or two of the 12, but the list of the 12. And this is really interesting because the Gospels, all of them name apostles. 3 of them, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, as well as the book of Acts, give lists like this one here in Matthew 10. And the interesting thing about them, 12 apostles, 15 names. Yes, that's right. We are listed all 15 of the 12 apostles. What's going on here? Well, you'll find that Matthew and Mark's lists agree completely. You will find that Luke and John, however, have some differences. By the way, John doesn't list the 12. He merely names them as they come up. And in fact, I think he only names 9. I'd have to check up on that. In any case, there are 3 major differences between these lists of apostles. First is the disciple that Matthew and Mark list as Thaddeus. Luke, John, and the book of Acts call the other Judas or Jude, or Judas not Iscariot. The second difference is that the apostle that the other Gospels and Acts list as Bartholomew, John never names. He doesn't mention Bartholomew at all. Instead, he does mention an apostle nobody else mentions called Nathaniel. And Matthew and Mark call one of the 12 Simon the Canaanian or Canaanite, whereas in Luke and Acts, he's called Simon the Zealot. Now, I have to tell you that all 3 of these discrepancies are pretty easy to explain. Start with Simon. Canaanite or Canaanian is simply a transliteration. A transliteration is where you're converting sound. You're writing down what it sounds like, right? It's a transliteration of a Hebrew word, kanai, which means, oh, guess what? Zealot. So he's Simon the Zealot either way. How about Bartholomew / Nathaniel? One is a last name and the other is a first name. Nathaniel's a first name. Bartholomew is a last name. Bartolome, or son of Ptolemy. And it makes perfect sense if the guy's name is Nathaniel Bartolome. As for Thaddeus, look, I think this one's pretty obvious. It's both confusing and probably a little embarrassing to be the other Judas, the one who is not Judas Iscariot, the one who is not the villain of the book. And Thaddeus is very likely a nickname. It means, in Greek, it means something like Prince of God, right? In any case, you can read that list and we can talk about that later. But while I'm here, and while I've got a minute, I want to answer a question that has come up before and that we never got around to, and that is, what became of these guys? What do we know about them, actually? And the honest answer, in most cases, we don't know much. We don't know much. The Bible only offers hints for a few. In Acts chapter 12, verse 1, for example, it records that James, the son of Zebedee, brother of John, right? James and John the fisherman, that James was put to death by the sword by King Herod Agrippa in 42 AD, I believe, is closest. Josephus gives a date on it. In any case, the Bible simply says that Herod Agrippa had him put to death by the sword. Josephus adds a little bit more date there, but Josephus isn't completely accurate or reliable in these things, so I don't know. In any case, the Bible doesn't tell us where James was martyred, but because it was under Herod Agrippa, it's likely to be Jerusalem. In 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 13, Peter sends greetings from the church that is at Babylon. Now that's pretty obviously code for Rome. And this fits a very early and very reliable, I think, tradition about Peter that he eventually ended up preaching in Rome and was martyred there sometime during the reign of Nero. And this actually also makes sense if the tradition that the Gospel of Mark was composed at Rome for the Roman Church based on the teaching of Peter is accurate. In any case, if John, son of Zebedee, brother of James, right, the fisherman, if John is the same person as the writer of Revelation, then we know, biblically speaking, that he is eventually imprisoned for the gospel, for preaching the gospel. He's imprisoned on the island of Patmos, which is currently off the coast of Asia Minor. It's off the coast of Turkey in the Aegean Sea. And as for John, we have a little bit more information, pretty reliable stuff, a little bit later. And it comes from Irenaeus of Lyon, who was a student of Polycarp, who was pastor in Ephesus, who was a student of John. So that's about as close as you get as far as a chain of relationships to one of the 12 from a later writer. And Irenaeus claims that Polycarp told him that John was in fact pastor and preacher in Ephesus and the surrounding area, that he died of old age, alone among the 12, that he died of old age sometime around the end of the 1st century during the reign of Diocletian. So, and there's, obviously we know from the Bible what happens to Judas. We know that he dies a rather swift and inglorious death just after Jesus' crucifixion. For the others, there are traditions. Again, some of these, like Irenaeus, there's a really good trail, paper trail for these, and they're very likely. Others range from unlikely, less than likely, to pure fantasy. But, well, I'll tell you a few of them. Eusebius of Caesarea, a church historian writing the 4th century, he records that Andrew preached in Greece and around the Black Sea and was crucified in the city of Patras in 60 AD, which I have to say sounds entirely likely. That may very well be true. A 4th century tradition says that Philip preached in Syria and was martyred in the city of Hierapolis on charges that he had led the wife of the proconsul of the city to Christ, and the proconsul got angry and had him killed. Eusebius, again, says that Bartholomew / Nathaniel Bartholomew, whatever his name is, went as far as India and Armenia preaching the gospel, and that he was martyred in Armenia. Thomas, by legend, preached as far as India, and according to legend, in India, was martyred there by a angry crowd of Hindus. And there are, to this date, Christians in southern India they're Syriac Orthodox Christians. In other words, they worship using a version of the Aramaic language, and they claim that their church was planted by Thomas. They call themselves Mar Thomas Christians, St. Thomas Christians. Clement of Alexandria and Irenaeus both say that Matthew preached to Jews in the Holy Land before going someplace else. The ancient writers all disagree about where he went after this, where he was martyred. That much is a pretty universal tradition. James, the son of Alphaeus, who incidentally may have been the brother of Matthew. Matthew is also mentioned as going under the name Levi, although it's really clear there that Matthew and Levi are the same person. And may have been the brother of Matthew. If you look at Mark chapter 2, verse 14, the calling of Matthew in the Gospel of Mark, initially he's called Levi, Levi the son of Alphaeus. So, in any case, otherwise not much is known about the fate of Matthew. James. Traditionally, he was said to be martyred in Egypt for the preaching of the gospel. The other Judas, or Thaddeus, may have written the book of Jude. There are actually about 3 or 4 different candidates for that. A tradition that tradition says that he accompanied Bartholomew on his mission and was killed with him in Armenia, although again, we don't have any hard information there. And as for Simon the Canaanian / Canaanite / Zealot, very, very little is known about him at all, and tradition records him being martyred by being sawn in two, although if you read the ancient writers, they place that martyrdom just about everywhere in the Mediterranean world. So that's it. That's what we know. These are who these guys are. And the important thing about these guys is not really the details. It's not really the details of where they preached. It's not really the details of who they were previously, although because they weren't anyone distinguished previously. They were a crowd of teenagers and fishermen and tax collectors and farmers. And they were, but the important thing is that they were called. That Jesus called them and he gave them a mission, and that they were so convicted by this that they were willing to preach the gospel unto death. And we'll talk more about that tonight, about a bunch of other things too. So go ahead, read Matthew 9 and 10, or the part that you didn't read last week, and hope to see you this evening.